It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mars, the red planet, named after the Roman god of war. At a distance of 140 million miles, or 225 million kilometres from the Earth, Mars is the fourth rock from the Sun. At about half the size of Earth, with a radius of 2,106 miles, or 3,390 kilometres, Mars, like the other three rocky planets, has a central core, a rocky mantle, and a solid crust. According to NASA, Mars has a dense core at its centre, between 930 and 1,300 miles, or 1,500 to 2,100 kilometres in radius. It's made of iron, nickel and sulphur. Surrounding the core is a rocky mantle between 770 and 1,170 miles, or 1,240 to 1,880 kilometres thick, and above that, a crust made of iron, magnesium, aluminium, calcium and potassium. This crust is between 6 and 30 miles, 10 to 50 kilometres deep. Though Mars is only about half the diameter of the Earth, its surface has almost the same area of dry land. Its volcanoes, impact craters, crustal movements and atmospheric conditions, such as dust storms, have altered the landscape of Mars, creating some of the most interesting topographical features in the solar system. Talking of topographical features, Mars has a large canyon system called Valles Marineris, which is long enough to stretch from California to New York. It's more than 3,000 miles or 4,800 kilometres. The canyon is 200 miles or 320 kilometres at its widest and 4.3 miles or 7 kilometres at its deepest. That's roughly 10 times the size of Earth's Grand Canyon. Mars is also home to the largest volcano in the solar system, Olympus Mons, being 3 times taller than Mount Everest. Mars is one of the most visited places in the solar system. It's seen orbiters, probes, landers, rovers, and now it even has a helicopter, appropriately named Ingenuity, in action on the planet. I will place a timeline of Mars exploration vehicles in the comments section below on YouTube. Despite being known as the red planet, Mars is predominantly actually an orange rusty brown. This is due to oxidization, also known as rust. But its surface is also made up from brown, gold and a kind of tan colour. Watch this quick NASA video for a closer look.
Is Mars really red? When you see Mars in the night sky, it definitely has a reddish tint to it. People have been noticing that for a long time. Even the ancient Egyptians called Mars the Red One. So where does that redness come from? Well, a lot of rocks on Mars are full of iron, and when they're exposed to the great outdoors, they oxidize and turn reddish, the same way an old bike left out in the yard gets all rusty. When rusty dust from those rocks gets kicked up in the atmosphere, it makes the Martian sky look pink. From a long way away, the whole planet looks kind of reddish, but if you get a close-up view, with an orbiter, lander, or rover, you'll see that a lot of Mars is actually more of a butterscotch color. Depending on what minerals are around, some landscapes can be more golden, brown, tan, or even a little greenish. So in fact, there are a lot of different colors on what we call the red planet.
The journey to Mars usually takes 7 to 8 months. This next video explains why this is.
How do you get to Mars? If you want to send a spacecraft all the way to Mars, first you'll need a fast rocket to escape the pull of Earth's gravity. The heavier your spacecraft, the more powerful your rocket needs to be to lift off. Next, make sure you launch at the right time. Mars and Earth orbit the Sun at different speeds and distances. Sometimes they're really far apart, and other times they come closer together. About every 2 years, the two planets are in perfect positions to get to Mars with the least amount of rocket fuel. That's important. The total trip is over 300 million miles. Finally, make sure your aim is right. You can't shoot for where Mars is at launch time. You have to aim for where it will be when you get there. It's a lot like how a quarterback passes a football. Also, you may need a few thrusts to correct your direction along the way so you don't miss Mars. If all goes well, you'll get to the red planet in about 7 or 8 months. Then, if you actually want to land on Mars, well, that's a whole other challenge.
Mars is 1.5 astronomical units from the Sun. 1 astronomical unit, or AU, is, as mentioned in our previous videos, the distance between the Sun and the Earth. From its distance of 1.5 AU, it takes something like 13 minutes to travel from the Sun to Mars. You could also refer to this distance as 13 light minutes. Mars no longer has a global magnetic field, but areas of the crust in the southern hemisphere are highly magnetized, indicating traces of a magnetic field estimated to be from 4 billion years ago. Scientists don't expect to find life on Mars, rather they are looking for signs that life once existed there, a long time ago, when Mars was warmer and had lots of water on its surface. Mars certainly appears to have had a watery past, with ancient river valley networks, deltas and lake beds, as well as rocks and minerals on the surface that could only have formed in liquid water. Some features suggest that Mars experienced huge floods about 3.5 billion years ago. There is some water on Mars today, but the Martian atmosphere is too thin for liquid water to exist for long on the surface. Today, water on Mars is found in the form of water ice, just under the surface of the polar regions, as well as in briny or salty water, which seasonally flows down some hillsides and crater walls. The red planet orbits the Sun in just under 670 sols, a sol being 1 Martian solar day, which is equal to 687 Earth days. It completes 1 rotation, a sol, every 24.6 hours, which is very similar to 1 solar day here on Earth, 23.9 hours. Mars' axis of rotation is tilted 25 degrees with respect to the plane of its orbit around the Sun, similar to the Earth, which has an actual tilt of 23.4 degrees. As a result of this tilt, Mars also has seasons, but they last longer than our seasons, as Mars takes much longer to orbit the Sun, not far off twice as long as it happens, because it's farther away. On Earth, the seasons are evenly spread over the course of the year, lasting 3 months, or 1/4 of a year each. On Mars, the seasons vary in length because of the elliptical orbital path it takes as it goes around the Sun. Let's look at the 4 seasons a little closer. Spring in the northern hemisphere, whilst autumn is in the southern hemisphere, is the longest season, at 194 sols. Moving on to summer in the northern hemisphere and winter in the southern, this takes 178 sols. Moving on further to autumn in the northern hemisphere, with spring in the southern hemisphere, is the shortest at 142 days. And finally, winter in the northern hemisphere and summer in the southern hemisphere takes 154 days, or, as we say, sols. Mars' atmosphere is thin and made up mostly of carbon dioxide, nitrogen and argon gases. To us, should we find ourselves stood on the surface, the sky would look hazy and a red colour due to the suspended dust in the atmosphere. Mars' thin atmosphere doesn't offer strong protection from the impact of meteorites, asteroids or comets. The temperature can be as high as 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 20 degrees Celsius, or as low as about minus 225 degrees Fahrenheit, which is minus 153 degrees Celsius. Because the atmosphere is so thin, heat from the Sun easily escapes the planet. Crazy NASA facts: if you were to stand on the surface of Mars on the equator at noon, it would feel like spring at your feet, 75 Fahrenheit, 24 Celsius, and winter at your head, 32 Fahrenheit and 0 degrees Celsius. The winds on Mars are strong enough at times to create dust storms that can go on to cover most of the planet, and it can be months before the dust fully settles. Does Mars have any moons? Well, yes. Mars has two small moons, Phobos and Deimos, thought to be captured asteroids. They are what has been described as potato-shaped, due to the fact their mass is too low to have pulled them into a spherical shape, and so they remain, well, potato-like. I have to agree. Phobos and Deimos are named after the horses that pulled the chariot of the Greek god of war, Ares. Phobos, heavily cratered and scarred with deep grooves, is the innermost and larger of the two moons. It's slowly moving towards Mars and expected to impact with the planet or break apart in about 50 million years. Deimos, about half the size of Phobos, orbits about 2.5 times farther away from Mars. Deimos is covered in loose dirt, which fills the craters on the surface of the moon, making it appear much smoother than its companion. As far as rings are concerned, Mars has none. However, when Phobos eventually crashes into Mars or breaks apart, it likely will create a dusty ring around the planet. Will man ever live on Mars? Tell me what you think in the comments section below. Next, on your place in the cosmos, the mightiest of the gas giants, Jupiter.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap